Hi, I'm
Hi,
Gabby with the Neighborhood News Bureau, and we're making a documentary about Methodist Town. Would you please state your first and last name?
John Washington,
Washington, and your date of birth.
November the 17th, 1943.
Okay. And have you lived in Methodist Town your whole life?
Yes.
Could you tell me about growing up in Methodist Town?
Well, we was living in a space, I guess, from 2nd Avenue to 5th Avenue, one named street, so that was 4 blocks one way and 6 blocks another. That was Methodist Town at that time, from 9th Street to 13th Street. And I was born on 4th Avenue North, right by the interstate, and by a midwife. And it's two things I always remember: my Social Security and my address, where I was born, 361 and a half, 12th Street North. And when you use the half address, that means you lived in an alley over here. But if you didn't have the half, you lived it on the street. So we lived it in an alley between 12th Street and 13th Street North. And that was our playground. And we had about 4 or 5 different stores, small neighborhood stores over here. And we all used to shop to a place called Webb City. That was on the south side, on 1st Avenue to 2nd Avenue South. And we went to school on the south side. We didn't have any schools over here. And basically, we just stayed in this area, you know. We would go down to the beach. We had a beach called South Mole. That's where the colored people used to live. And that's where we went swimming. We would walk there, and then we would walk back to the north side. But you notice I say north side. That's what we call this. But it was called Methodist Town, too. And this is where I grew up at. You know, we just played, and we never hardly ever went out of this area. Like we was going to school. We was privileged maybe to go to Cameron's Park to a football game. That's where Gibbs High used to play their football games at Cameron's Park. And the Harlem Theater was on 3rd Avenue and about 10th Street South. That was the gist of our going right in that area.
So, could you tell me a little bit about your home, like the people in your house and how your family like operated and stuff?
Well, we lived at one time in a 3-bedroom house. It was 10 of us. We had a kitchen, a bedroom, and a living room. I had 4 brothers and 4 sisters. And like I say, everything we did, basically, we did on the north side. It was Miss Roxana Donaldson. She run at the beach for the colored people. And she had a band, and we would have parades over in here. We had, it used to be a place called, do y'all remember that lumber company?
Lumber?
Yeah, company. Anyway, they the one brought the Santa Claus over. We used to ride through the neighborhood during Christmas. And one of the big events we used to go to was the Festival State Parade. Our whole family would go down there. That was on Central. And like I say, that was about all of it. But like I say, we grew up at one time. My dad had tried to sell chickens. He had a little chicken farm over there. But he was a florist. He worked for Trimmer's Florist. And all us worked for Trimmer's Florist because when we got up big enough, he used to take us to work with him. And we would cut yards, paint greenhouses and stuff like that around the florist.
Is there any familiar faces that you remember seeing around town, like somebody that everybody knew?
Well, yeah, we had a lot of people's. There was a man we used to call I Got Him, and he used to sell vegetables, peanuts, and stuff like that. And there was a man called Dickie. He had a truck, a vegetable truck. He used to go around and sell vegetables and stuff like that. And there used to be a man, he owned a cleaner's a restaurant and a store. His name was Mr. J.P. Moses. He used to hire a lot of us to work for him in his store and clean up around his businesses. And then there was Willie Gregors. He did the same thing. He owned a motel, stove, bar, restaurant. So that was about the big part of our going and working, you know, in that area.
Could you tell me a little bit about going to school in Methodist Town?
Okay, well, like I said, we went to Davis School. That was over on 3rd Avenue South, and it was Davis Elementary. I think during that time you had two elementaries, Jordan Park Elementary and Davis Elementary, and that was the closest one to us. So basically everybody, I know everybody in this area went to Davis Elementary, 3, from 1 to 6. And I remember they used to have what they called chapel every morning, you know. Everybody would assemble out and you would say the national anthem and salute the flag. Then you would go to your classes. And they had a playground out there. We loved it because we didn't have a playground over here. We used to play different places. The post office used to let us play at Naylot at one time. And Mirror Lake. We used to go down to Mirror Lake and swim down there. And they had banyan trees where we would fish and play, you know, swinging in the water and stuff like that. And then if you were allowed, you go to the beach.
Would you be able to walk me through a day of like being a child?
Well, yeah, I mean, actually, my childhood, you stayed around the house. You didn't go any place unless it was on I think that was on a Wednesday. Webb City used to sell chickens on sale. Chicken used to be on sale on Wednesday, so everybody went to Webb City. You know, your parents gave you a couple bucks, and all the 8 children went and got chicken so we can have plenty of chicken. But basically, we played football, basketball, tennis ball, right in the area that we was playing. We never hardly left there. You know, we just stayed there. I can tell you a story. This and tell you how far we went. I remember one Christmas we got bicycles and we rode from here to out 31st Street to Pinellas Point, and we came back up 4th Street. Okay, and I told you our Methodist Town ended at 5th Avenue, so we came from the back way. And I don't know if you ever travel from here to Pinellas Point. That was a long way. So to show you how far we left from around our home, I was coming back the back way and saw a lady sitting on the porch like my aunt. I thought I was in New York. You know what I mean? We never went far. You know what I mean? I said, ooh, that's my Aunt Marley. You know? But that's, you know, we weren't allowed to go in it basically, like I say, from 5th Avenue to 2nd Avenue, from 10th Street right there to 13th Street. That was Methodist Town. And we basically did everything in that area. Like if you went to the movie, you went on the south side to the Royal Theater. I remember Hopalong Cast and all them guys used to be coming and would sign autographs. You know, you save your bottle tops, knee-high sodas and stuff like that. It was a big day that you go over there and stay the whole day. And we did have another movie for a while. It was called The Lay Plaza, where the African Americans were up top and the Caucasians were down to the bottom. And we used to go to the Lay Plaza. So we had 3 movies, show places to go to. But like I said, we wasn't allowed too much. We used to go with my father to the Trimmer's Nursery. That's where we spent most of our time, and especially all our summers, working around Trimmer's floors.
Do you remember any other traditions or things that you would often do with your family?
Well, yeah, the Festival State Parade was one, and we had wasn't what you call a holiday, but they used to have, was that a holiday? It's called Silas Green. It used to come once a year, where it was something like a circus come here, and they would be at Campbell's Park, and there was so many people be out there, but we didn't go out to Cameron Park. We had Silence Green over here in our alley. You know, everything was fixed up and stuff like that. So that was Silence Green. We had the Festival State Parade, and when I got over 12, was allowed to go to football games. That was about the biggest, and baseball games out of Cameron Park. But other than that, we stayed right over here in Methodist Town. And everything that we did, Miss Roxana Simpson Donaldson, she was the midwife. She was over everything. Like I say, she had a band, majorettes and stuff. They would walk up and, you know, march around the north side for different occasions. And we had, it wasn't Henry Lumber Company, I was trying to think, Pinellas Lumber Company. They had a big truck. They would put a Santa Claus on around Christmas and come around through here, throwing candy and stuff like that.
Could you tell me about the sense of community of the town?
The sense of community?
Yes. Maybe I phrased that wrong.
Yeah.
But it seems like everybody was really involved with each other in the town.
Oh, yeah, well, you knew everybody. You know, it was kind of close. It was basically families. But this side of town, this side of town was what you would call everybody that came from Alabama, Mississippi, and Georgia came here first. They stayed here and they got a job and they did better, then they moved south. See, a lot of people didn't stay over here long. How long did y'all stay over here?
We're one of the longer
Oh,
ones.
okay, well, most people, when, you know, you call your relatives and they come from Georgia, Alabama, and then they come here in Methodist Town, they get a job and then they move south. Because I moved south when I was 16. See, I was born over here, but when I became 16, I moved. But my mother and my dad didn't move till they was in their 60s. See? But yeah, most people would come here, stay here, get a job, and then they would move, get a better place, better jobs.
And, well, you moved when you were 16, or maybe your parents, did they notice any changes in the community as, like, time went by?
Well, yeah, you can tell the different from the next generation coming up. They was a little different from me, you know. And went to school, just like that. That's a different generation over there. See, them guys did some things and went some places I never went, you know.
How would you say they're different from your generation?
Well, the age different. You know, they went to school, and when I think, in fact, both of them went into the armed forces. I didn't go into the armed forces. I worked all my life, you know, and got grown, you just worked. Mm-hmm. And like I did the rest of them, when I did better, I moved south. I went out on my own when I was 17. I moved south.
Could you tell me about living on your own and working?
Well, yeah, it was fun at first, 'cause, you know, you're on your own and you're working, you know. And my father always taught me how to live, so I didn't have any hard times. I've never been back home, because when I left, he told me not to come back, unless and it was for a family reunion, and I better bring a covered dish. You know? But, yeah, I had, you know, I liked living, because he brought us up and taught us how to work. And so I always know, if you work, you can get a job. And you get a job, you can make it. And that's what I did all my life, just working, you know.
Could you tell me about some of the other values that you learned from your dad?
Most of the values I learned from my mother.
Oh, from your
My
mother.
dad had worked at 2 and 3 jobs, and he was never home a lot of times. I was the dad, you know, I was the oldest guy, so they put me in charge of everything. He was always working, and mostly I was working with him, you know, because he had 3 and 4 jobs sometimes. But my mother, she was a very religious lady, and we had to go to church until I got 16. But we all went to church. We all went to the same church. In fact, the church is right across the alley from where we stayed, St. Mark. It's still over there today. And she always taught us to, and my father did too, that blood was thicker than water. He always was safe when my sisters and brothers had families and stuff. He didn't allow us to go. You know how you have school projects selling candy and all that. We'd sell it amongst ourselves. He didn't allow us to go out and knock on doors and ask people to buy a candy bar, this and that and the other. That's the way he was. We all stayed together. Like,
Could you tell me about going to church?
oh, well, yeah. When I was going to church, I hated it. I didn't want to go to church, but back then, your mother went to church. My daddy didn't go to church. But I had to go to church. But now I love going to church for the last 40 years. But back then, I didn't want to go to church. But I wouldn't ever tell nobody. I just went. That's what you had to do. When on Sundays, you had to go to church. So it wasn't no problem, you know.
Can you talk about church and like how religion and going to church is a part of your life?
Well, because I started when I was young, and I did go away from it for a few years while I was out there in the world. But I came back to it. You know, when things happen in your life, and you know how God will bring you through situations, and I decided to dedicate myself and serve Him. So I started in the church where I started at, under the St. Mark Missionary Baptist Church. And I feel lost if I don't go to church, you know. Yeah.
And what does going to church and being a part of this community do for you? Like, how does it?
Well, it do a lot when you're able to help someone, you know. And that was another thing. My mother, she was worked for, what do you call it, an agent that helped people. So I was always with her and saw what she did and saw how she did it. So I loved it just to be around people and help people, you know, because I see where God had blessed me, you know, with my health and strength. I've never been sick or any type of thing like that. And it seemed like I always got what I wanted because I always worked. I always had the mindset if I worked, I can get anything, you know. So I enjoy being around other Christians, you know, singing and listening to them and going out and help ministering to them. That's what I used to take my mother different places, you know, people sick. Back then they used to go clean houses and stuff like that. That was another thing. I used to love to drive, so I always had an automobile. Ever since I was 16 when I bought my first automobile. I saved my money. I used to take my money to my sister's house. She was married. She had a trunk. And I was working for this car wash, and I used to put all my money in that trunk. And that's how I bought my first car.
Do you have any memorable experiences with the church, like any specific memories that you always think about or that you can just remember?
Well, I think the old and new. I think of when I was a small boy, our pastor, Reverend Glover, he used to cut hair, and he used to come back there in the alley and cut our hair, you know, and talk with us and do things of that nature. Because at one time I thought he was God, you know, because he would come back there where we was in that alley and talk with us and bring us candy and stuff. And you can always go to his barber shop, and his wife would come and do the girls, my sisters and them, hair and stuff like that. So, and they stayed right across the alley from us. But that was one of the things I always liked about St. Mark. They would always help people, you know.
And you were talking about your first car, which I'm guessing was like a really big deal for you.
Oh, yeah.
Do you have any other milestones that you remember, like, wow, I did that. Like, this was my first time doing this?
Well, that car was by the name when I get married, and my first child was my daughter, and then my son. I used to love, like I said, I used to love jobs driving. You know, so I had a lot of jobs, different type jobs, driving and delivering, stuff like that. That's about basically.
Do you notice any differences with how your children were or grew up and how it could be different than how you grew up?
Oh yeah, it's big difference. My children, I done forgot how they was now 'cause these grandchildren and great grandchildren, you know. But you know, anytime I spoke with my mother, father, it was yes sir, no sir. And that's the same that I require my children, my grandchildren, and my great grands, 3 years old twins, and they say yes sir and no sir when they talk to me. 'Cause they try to run me too, you know, they know. But what I experienced with my father is by respecting him, like I said before, he always taught us how to work. He couldn't read, and an alligator bit one of his hands off and one of his eyes. But he always worked at 2 and 3 jobs and took care of his family. So that was motivation for me to always work, because that's what he always would say. If you get a job, you can make it.
Could you tell me a little bit more about your dad? Was he like a very familiar face with other people around town?
Yeah, he was, they had a write-up about him because he grew orchids. They used to call him the Orchid Man. And I remember the Weavers, they owned the Derby Lane dog track. See, and when the Derby Lane opening up, we used to go out there and do all the garden work out there, put the flowers in, annuals and all that. And Miss Weaver stayed out in the Tyrone area, and she was orchid grower, so she would get my father to go out there. That was another thing I got to go out. We would catch the bus out in Tyrone area and go to the Weaver's house, and my father would show her about the orchids and stuff like that, and I would go down to with her father. He was an older man. He had a garden. You know, they had a community garden out there years ago. You know, and he would pit-pat in the garden, and I would weed and stuff like that. And at the end of the day, everybody in that garden would give us all the vegetables we wanted, and then his son would bring us back to the north side with all those vegetables and stuff.
Is there any other things that the community did together as like a whole, like the community garden? Did they?
No, well, yeah, like I said, Miss Roxana Donaldson, she was in charge of the north side, the Methodist town, as you call it. And like I said, we had 4 or 5 different things that we would do every year together. We had we called it tennis ball, but it was like baseball, but you use a tennis ball and a broomstick. And that was a big thing because you had, even though this was a small area, you had people's old 4th Avenue. See, I didn't go across 4th Avenue until years later. They had little groups over there, and then in my area, and then from Burlington to 2nd Avenue, from Burlington, 2nd Avenue, they had group. And we would challenge each other. We would play each other ball and stuff. So that was a big day. It was 4 or 5 times a year.
Why did you never go past 4th Avenue?
Well, might get beat up or something. You know, that was like another neighborhood from 4th Avenue to, I would go across, you know, I knew everybody. But from 4th Avenue to 5th Avenue, he stayed over there.
Could you tell me about that? Was there like a rivalry or something?
Oh, yeah, it was always a rivalry, you know, guys your age and stuff. You know, the girls over there, they don't want you over there talking to them girls, and they don't want you, you know, it was always that. You had different segments of this community. That's 10th Street out there. From 10th Street to this alley here, most of the people that lived in that alley was well-to-do in that section. There was teachers and stuff like that. And from 10th Street back to that alley there, they used to call it Death Alley. And you can imagine why you didn't go. You know what I mean? And then on the other side, they had an alley they called Bolita Alley. That was a gambling enterprise that they used to do. So you didn't go through there. When I went to Webb City, I stayed 361. That means I stayed right off of 3rd Avenue there. I would walk from 12th Street straight down 3rd Avenue to 9th Street and straight down 9th Street to Webb City. And I would come back that way. I didn't go that way. When I went to school, I went that way. Very Southern, you would go through this neighborhood because you had different gangs and stuff. You know, I use the word gang, but it wasn't gang. It was just neighborhood, and you just didn't walk through their neighborhood. You know, I was saying something funny. Where I lived in the alley, we didn't have grass, but my dad, he was a master gardener, so we had roses. He had roses all around our house. But our front yard and stuff was dirt, so I had to rake it. And here's the alley and house on this side, so I would rake half the alley on my side. So I might fight the guy come walking through my yard. My dad had come home and said, "Boy, you don't rake this yard, all these footprints," you know, stuff like that, silly stuff like that. But we lived it, and they had a community where they washed. You know, they had a wash area where all the ladies would go and wash and stuff and hang all their clothes and our clothes. And I remember when I was 16 years old, I was still bathed in a bathtub. We didn't have a bathtub, but a tin tub. I didn't know what a bathtub was until I got a room over on the south side when I was 16.
Okay. For the last couple questions, are we able to get everybody together?
Well, before we close,
Oh, okay.
do you have anything that we haven't talked about that's important to you to mention?
I don't know. I don't really know.
No worries. We
No,
just
I don't.
have
I
some
don't
kind of
think so.
something.
Like I said, I had 4 sisters, and my second sister, she wrote the school song for Davis Elementary. Dear, dear Davis, the school we love so well. And they skipped her in grades. She was very intelligent, smart. Yeah. Her name was Lorraine. Yeah, she was the second daughter, sister. Other than that, we used to play down the Boogers Creek, and we could go down under the city from First Avenue, right where it's still there now, at Tropicana Field. They got a trestle there, and that's where we used to walk to school and go to the movie. We used to walk across that trestle, go straight down 13th Street. The police station was there. You cross Central and First Avenue, and there's that trestle. It's still there now. The pecan tree's still lying there, but we can go down there and get underground and come up on Park Street. We used to go through underground, come up every now and then if you want to. But Boogers Creek, that's where it runs at. It runs from Rosa Park all the way to Park Street, and Tyrone, where it come out at. Abercrombie Park, I think that's the name of it. That's where it come out at. Yeah, that's where we used to go crabbing. But no, I couldn't think of nothing. I don't know, but a lot of friends and acquaintances that we grew up with, basically all gone, you know. So.
Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay.